Mabuhay!
Hi! Welcome to
The Babaylan Bruha Book Club podcast.
It's Your Village Kapwatids, Steph.
And Imee, and here we are together again. And as always, in efforts to decolonize our minds, bodies, and reconnect with spirit by ways of relation via conversation, of education, interpretation, and integration.
So, this is our invitation for you to join us on our journeys as we discuss the works of honored artists, authors, and thought leaders in the Filipinx diaspora.
Quick disclaimer, we want to acknowledge that in this moment, everyone is exactly where they need to be.
And since we are not experts, yet we share our own unique lived experiences, we invite you to take or toss any statements, opinions, words that we may use as you choose.
We are so glad you found your way here. As always, before we begin, we want to take a moment to ground, taking a pause to drop into our bodies and become fully present to this space. If it is safe for you, we invite you to close your eyes, straighten your spine, and direct your focus onto your breath. Take a few deep inhales, extending your belly out, and exhales, bringing your belly in. One more time, inhale and exhale. And one more time, inhale and exhale. We invite you to continue to breathe on your own timing, but continue to breathe deeply and slowly, letting everything go as you exhale each time. Connect back into your body and into this moment. Try not to think about earlier or later on today, and just see if you can allow yourself to feel what it's like to be in the here and the now. And as we begin our conversation, as always, we'd like to thank God, Bathala, Creator, for another gathering. In gratitude, we acknowledge our benevolent ancestors and invite all these forces to guide and protect this conversation today. We also thank the ancestors of the land Stephanie and I currently occupy, knowing we cannot do our own remembrance without remembering them. For me, that is the mound builders that are the Hopewell and Adena people in Ohio. And for Stephanie, that is the Bay, Miwok, Yokut people in the Inland Bay area of California. With gratitude, we also acknowledge your presence, Kaputid, your energy and your light, no matter wherever and whenever you're tuning in.
Thank you, sis. That was a great opener. So this normally we go into Bruha Tings, and we thought a Bruha Ting we might talk about today is our. If you didn't get the color or the memo by now, Sissy, I felt inspired. It was Galentine's, and my friend was making sweaters. So shout out to Ashley for these. You can holler at her, DM us, and I'm happy to point you to her. But yeah, it's a Bruha twin moment today, and it's
Bahala ka sa buhay mo.
right.
Yeah.
You might have heard that from your Filipino mom, tita, tito,
Yeah.
Lola.
But I like they always said it like, oh, okay, go ahead. Like, it's your life. Do what you want. Like, kind of in a tone of I don't know what that tone is called, but like, yeah.
This is showing all the brands, you know.
Yeah, show
stickers, y'all. We still got
merch.
stickers for merch.
Merch. But yeah, but I like how I feel like we are what is it called? Like reclaiming it, and it's like, you know what? It's your life. Do what you want, right?
Yeah.
But our parents and the elders are like, okay, fine, it's your life. Do what you want, like a guilt trip. And we're like,
Yeah.
it's your life. What you want? Like you are a sovereign being.
Yes.
Go
Yes.
ahead.
So we're putting a positive twist to it.
Yeah. So thank you, Sissy, for my shirt
You're
for
welcome.
Valentine's Day.
Just highlighting y'all's lives, your timeline. Thanks for
Yeah.
tuning in.
If
Oh,
you
I'm gonna plug another jeweler. This is Sunkissed Panay, and
oh
this
yeah.
is my maiden name. It says Kasintahan. I can't, no, y'all can see it. Kasintahan. Anyway, and fun little note. It means sweetheart in Tagalog.
Oh.
If someone's like babe, formal way.
And so I have I'm not wearing it, but I have one of her necklaces too, Sunkissed Pinay. And these earrings are made by gosh, I don't remember. He's not making them anymore, but these earrings were made by
Show the
a
people. Show the
Filipino
people.
artisan. And
Lean in.
those are the like the markings, like the
Yeah.
tribal markings. So these are actually my favorite earrings, and I love how like they're different.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
Yeah, like they're not matching. So anyway, just wanted to shout out some creators and show off our shirts. So you can see if you're on the YouTubes, or if you see us on video on Spotify, my shirt is very bright right now, like
What? A
super
highlighter.
bright,
Highlighter.
glowing.
See, her Merkaba body is activating,
Yes,
y'all.
my crystalline light body is activated.
Hey,
It's a Bruha
lead
Tings.
the way, ate. All right, y'all. So we dive into Brown Girl Cliff Notes now. And we did chapter 13 and 14. 13 was entitled Sugbo, 14 Trouble in Paradise. Sugbo in Tagalog means rush. And it was perhaps a rushed summary of sequence of events when Miguel Lopez Legazpi landed in Cebu unopposed on Sunday, April 24th. 28th of 1565, seeking provisions and proclaiming lands to settle on. So Legazpi particularly targeted creating a treaty with Chief Tupas, who, if y'all's been following or reading the book, he had in his younger years established connection during the Magellan times. Chief Tupas had seen the Battle of Mactan, and Ate Judy speculates he may have been a wanted man who was intermittently compliant to the Spaniards' request of his presence due to deep emotions from that time period. So they kept trying to ask for him to talk to him, but he would like show up kind of and not, and then show up kind of and not. So so the chapter kind of portrays 3 attempts Legazpi and his crew set to attempt to meet with the natives of Cebu. So while Legazpi landed, right? And he was like, let me talk to Chief Tupas.
I just want to talk.
Yeah.
I just want to talk.
And the Filipinos were like, oh, we've been here before. Most of them packed up their things and fled. And they had formed a wave of reinforcement warriors from neighboring villages. And so they kind of showed up and, they tried to like intimidate them a bit, but Legazpi and his crew, they have ships with more technology and the natives don't like guns. So they came back, they retaliated with the ship guns, and that definitely overtook the natives. And it ended with, unfortunately, villages ablaze and ransom captures. So the days to follow consisted of construction, desecration of sacred land and communities, y'all. We're going to get into the drama now. So brace your hearts. Legazpi refused to end the violence until the reluctant Chief Tupas showed up to eventually sign an overall kind of one-sided treaty. This is around June 1st. So this is about a month stuffs. The development of military occupation and annexation of territory led to intentional hunger strikes, trade challenges, and ongoing spurts of rebellion in nearby villages until about 2 years. The Filipino natives surrendered fully. And the full Spanish Empire took over. Spain officially took complete control of Cebu's eastern outpost location. So that's chapter 13.
Woo! Yes. And so chapter 14 was dedicated to depict the next 2 years of Legazpi's colonization of Cebu to eventually relocating to the island of Panay. According to Ati Judy's research, Legazpi struggled with plagues of malcontent and mutiny driven by hunger and disease. In addition to Legazpi's process of establishing control, he was met with friars reporting corrupt Spanish leaders for hanging and Portuguese forces and their allies in neighboring villages who would be spying and conspiring to eventually attempt to besiege Cebu. The days on end siege resulted in the burning down and pillaging of villages, mostly Filipinos who were merely caught in the middle. Eventually, Legazpi's conquest to continue establishing trade routes and expand the Spanish Empire led to the establishment of systems designed to divide the Filipinos into colonized slaves. So we really get into the meat of things. So like Steph said, just kind of, this isn't necessarily such a fun.
It's not a pretty chapter. It's no more
No.
talk. It's all conquer. And
Yeah.
this is like the general skeleton summary. So imagine how many stories are going on at this time. So yeah.
So, well, let's just get into it.
Bye.
Okay, so we're going to get into vocabulary words and quotes for chapter 13, and then we'll do the same for chapter 14, okay? So, my vocabulary word is the word Sugbo, which is the name of chapter 13. And as Steph said before, Sugbo means rush in Tagalog. And then Ati Judy actually talks about it in her book, and it says what's interesting is that the ancient name for Cebu city was Sugbo, derived from the old Cebuano term for scorched earth. Sadly, the name seemed to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, and as we touched on in the summary, Legazpi and his men, there was a lot of burning. There's lots of burning. They burned down a granary. They burned down like 300 huts. It was so the earth was literally scorched. So it's just interesting. I don't know why they named it that in the first place, because if you think about it, it's Cebu. Like, why would they name it Sugbo, scorched earth, right? And so, yeah, sadly, the name seemed to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, what is that? That's a Bruha Ting. Words are
spells. I was just thinking that.
Yes.
Bruha telepathy.
Words are spells.
Yeah.
So that was mine.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, sis. Because mind you, this is 2 years of just constantly burning shit and them fighting. So again, it's not a pretty chapter at all. So my word is on page 190. And it is desecration. So I don't know if anybody listens to island reggae out there, but I think it was, I'm gonna be in trouble. Desecration is a Hawaiian reggae song. And I think it's Ikolu. It's Ikolu. Yeah. I should have just trusted my intuition. Don't ever gaslight your intuition. But yeah. So Ikolu has a song called Desecration, and that's kind of like the first time I've heard in the music, because I'm into music, obviously, and we know publicly that indigenous lands have always been under fire. Like, it's always been, Europeans just think that they can come in and take people's land. It's, that sounds lighter than it is, because it's not funny in many cases. Millions of indigenous lives have been lost due to greed. So I bring up desecration because I think this is a sacred word to honor as we move through decolonizing, recognizing this is part of the grief of loss that our ancestors endured. And now we are uncovering that history as Filipinos. And we're not even Filipinos. We're because we were named after, Philip, King Philip. So our name in general is like not even like that's a sacredness. So desecration by definition means like to the action of desecrating something. I'm on the computer, y'all, while I'm looking up. Yes, I am. But basically, you take a sacred place and you disrespect the shit out of it. And we've been desecrating Earth. Let's just be real. Inang Bayan for years, millennia. Like, so in this context, though, in this chapter on page 190, there was a part where it talked about, as you know, Philippines had gold and they would bury their ancestors with it. So once the Spaniards found out, of course, they're going to be like, oh, we want some gold. And they don't give a fuck if people are buried in the ground. They will turn that shit over and try to, excuse my language, but like, I just share the intensity of that, because imagine if someone dug up your grandma's grave and for gold and was like, this is for the King of Spain. That's
what happened. That's
yes.
literally what happened to someone's Lola.
Yes. So yeah, it's a time where food was scarce. Goldwork Islanders were obviously known for it, and Legazpi became aware of the extent of these riches, so he issued an official proclamation that all graves in the future should be opened in the presence of royal officers to make sure the King of Spain received his fair share. I don't know exactly what that means, but the fact that they knew that there was obviously gold in the Philippines, and you're interfering with people's sacred burial rituals because you want gold, like, okay. So Ate Judy says, I think that the desecration of their ancestors' graves must have been a source of angst and agitation for the Cebu natives. And as people have heard, the Visayans, the residents of Cebu, Filipinos in general, we worship nature spirits and their own ancestors.
Yeah. So that was that's hard to read and to know, so yeah. Shit.
So get mad. If you're mad, it's okay. Get mad. I was mad too. I was feeling flooded reading this stuff. Just kind of like, you read books and it teleports you into that story time. And it's hard to picture such violence. Even we know about it, we hear about it, but to actually like read about it and then sit on this podcast and share, like, I just want to honor, like, yeah, I felt a flood of emotions. I don't know. What about you, sis?
Yeah, I felt like it was so dehumanizing. It's dehumanizing because it's almost like, okay, because if you think about it, burying your loved ones, ancestors, like death is something that can that everybody is touched by. So that's almost like a shared human experience, right? A human experience. So for the Spaniards to come in and just be like, oh well, okay, just dig up their dead. It's dehumanizing. It's just like, oh, well, I don't care about their human experience. I don't care about, like, I'm sure Legazpi buried people, right? I'm sure he had people in his life that he loved that or knew of that passed away and that he had to bury, right? So he couldn't even in his heart be like, maybe we should just leave their dead alone, because I wouldn't want anyone to do that to my loved ones. But instead he was like, not only is he gonna open, he official proclamation and should be opened in the presence of royal officers. So it was like a whole ass thing. It was like a whole ass ritual with like official people, and then they like declared all of the stuff they found for the King of Spain. I mean, that's like gross. You have to like dig up. It's people. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I was real upset. It's like dehumanizing.
Yeah, you're already burning the land. Let's also interrupt your burial and regulate that. Like,
Yeah.
not only am I gonna come to your house,
Mm-hmm.
your land, burn your shit down, claim this for some fucking country that most people are like, what?
Yeah.
And then take the riches. Now I'm gonna interfere with like your lifestyle.
Yeah. So, but anyway, take a deep breath. I know this happened centuries ago, but it lives in our bodies like this.
Yeah.
That's why to read this even in 2023 about what happened in 1565, that's why it still affects us now, because these are our ancestors,
Yeah.
So, but anyway. All right, so we're gonna go into quotes. So what I wanted to bring attention to was, so like we touched on in the summary, Tupas kept saying he was gonna, like Legazpi kept saying, I want to talk to Tupas. I want to, that's the only person I'm gonna talk to. But Tupas kept saying, yeah, I'll be there. Don't worry, I'll be there. I'll be there. But he never was there. And he took all his people and he left. So unfortunately, Legazpi actually seized some hostages. And among the hostages were a few women. And one of the women claimed she was related to Tupas. So, long story short, Tupas finally relented because, that's his family. Again, human, right? That's a human experience. So a few days later, Tupas relented and a treaty of peace was made. And so it's like, oh, peace was made, right? But what Scott says, the historian Scott, what Legazpi called a treaty was actually the terms of an unconditional surrender. He described it as a kind of prototype of unequal treaties, which Western nations were to fasten on, this is Scott's words, Oriental peoples for the next 3 centuries. So, yeah.
Take deep breaths. Yeah.
Again, it's like when they came in and said, okay, you don't have to be Christians, but we're going to treat you better if you're Christian. So of course, if you have a gun to your head and you want to survive, you're going to be like, okay, I'm Christian. So it's almost like the same energy. It's like, oh, yeah, this is a peace treaty, but it's actually, they call it a peace treaty so that maybe, like, technically in history, they can be like, oh yeah, we made a peace treaty, but really in the terms of the treaty, it's the treaty, the
peace treaty. We got
treaty.
you.
Thank
We
you.
got you. They got you.
That's how upset I am. My words is getting all crazy. But
Take your rage.
it was just like, it's just unconditional surrender. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like backing people up, putting them between a rock and a hard place.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
What's to do? We either die or we surrender. And I get it. Some people will die, rather than compromise their honor. I think Filipinos, like, this is just a little, I don't know why my mind is going there, but just bear with me. Like, we live on an island. It's warm. Like, we got he's like, they probably want to live, you know what I mean? But little did they know these fucking Europeans are going to ruin their lives for the next 500 years and make them forget about themselves. Anyways.
So anyway, that was my quote and I am complete.
Thanks for sharing that one, sis. It's a nice portrayal of the bigger picture. Again, tap in, y'all. Read the chapter and see what you pull up for you and take and toss what we say, So my quote is on page 190 to 191, and that's when it starts, like a timeline reference. Remember, they landed in April 28th. They claimed the land and the name for Spain. And by May 16th, this is what's happening. Legazpi is considering the fort secure enough to receive the presence of Santo Nino. So he's going to bring back in that religious aspect, right? And it transferred in a solemn processing for military escort. There was something they found, a sis said, when they were burning things down, and it, I don't know what it is, to remind him to bring up the religion piece again, right? But my point about bringing up this quote is there, he says that, or Ate Judy says, I found a surprising detail from Blair and Robertson that the procession included a large number of Cebu residents under two chiefs who had professed friendship to the Spaniards. I was surprised that because I thought Filipinos would be united in their efforts to evict the new arrivals. So I think this was interesting to say, because as I was reading, I was thinking about how the archipelago is like 7,000 islands, right? And we have so many dialects. And here we are in this one area in Cebu. Legazpi is trying to like unify and bring in his rules and his processions and stuff. And there's Filipinos who are around who actually support it, or they'll be present. So I just wanted to kind of highlight her point about, you know, Filipinos uniting, right? Because it's very sticky in a sense of, I'm just like, you know, thinking, why can't we all unite? But we have different languages, we have different, you know, it's so, I don't know. There was something about like, dang, why don't we unite, you know? So
Yeah.
I thought that that was interesting to highlight that while you're picturing that scene, there's going to be Filipinos who are like in favor of it while everything is burning, you know?
Yeah. So we were different, um, different regions, different languages, we were like, we weren't a whole country. So it's interesting to me that colonization actually has brought us all together, because, you know, if you meet a Filipino, that's the first thing you're probably going to know about them, is that you're Filipino. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know, I always just like throw that in whenever I first meet somebody. I just like mention it, just like, you know, just weave it in randomly. Like if somebody's Filipino, you're going to know like within the first day or so of meeting them that they are Filipino.
Yo, my dentist was like that
Yeah.
when I first met her. I didn't even know she was Filipino, but I was wearing, I think, something with babayan, and she was like, "Oh, kababayan," and I was like, "Oh, snap! You don't know you're Filipino because you don't look Filipino."
Yeah.
So,
But that's what I'm saying. So it's it's sad to think that there were Filipinos who would be on the side of the Spaniards. But if you think about it, they didn't consider themselves united with all of the other 7,000 islands, right? Because there were chiefs who were fighting other chiefs for territory, et cetera, et cetera. So again, Ati Judy highlights just the nuance, the so much nuance to the history of what is happening. So, like the overall arching theme, I feel like is the dehumanization of the indigenous people of the islands of that time by the Spaniards. But within that is the nuance of humanity, is the nuance of, you know, people just trying to protect their families, of just trying to survive, you know.
yeah,
So it's very interesting. So
yeah.
but
So many perspectives to consider. It's not black and white.
yeah,
That's what that sparked for me. So,
thanks, Sissy.
yeah.
Okay, so that was chapter 13. So
Yeah.
let's get into chapter 14. I'm not gonna lie, there's no happy ending here. We all know how the book ends, y'all. But let's get into some quotes for chapter 4, or vocabulary words for chapter 14, and then we'll talk about quotes. So my word was panay, Panay. So Ate Judah writes, Panay is the sixth largest island in the Philippines. From Blair and Robertson's translations, I found Miguel de Loarca's account in 1582 that described the island as the most fertile and well provisioned of all the islands discovered, except for the island of Luzon. Loarca wrote that Panay had plenty of rice, swine, fowls, wax, and honey. Wax was interesting. I don't know why they brought up wax. Maybe because candles were a big thing. Wax and honey. So Legazpi actually moved his colony from Cebu to the island of Panay. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of highlight that. And like we said, the islands, there's like 7,000 islands, depending if it's low tide or high tide.
Yeah.
Right? And but Panay is the sixth largest island in the Philippines.
Sixth largest?
Yes, what's that? Sixth largest. So there we go.
Number 6, huh? What's number 1? I wonder.
Maybe Luzon. I feel like Luzon is probably the largest. So
Well, that makes sense. Should we look it up?
yeah.
Y'all can look it up. Okay, so it's looking it up.
Largest island in Philippines is Luzon.
You was right. See, the intuition.
Right. All right.
Okay.
So that is mine.
Thank you, sis. I actually wrote down 2 vocab words. I really want to get to the second one, so I'm just going to slightly mention 201 really quick. It's subsistence farming. I thought that was a really interesting word. What we talked about in the past, indigenous people just know how much to give and how much to take from the land. So that's it. Like, I think Ate Judy just kind of cites quickly, Filipinos practice subsistence farming. They grew only enough for themselves for the present. And Legazpi actually thought that they were lazy because they didn't do mass production. So this is a conversation around capitalism and mass production.
Yeah.
Like Legazpi says in his letters, Filipinos do not even try to become wealthy, nor do they care to accumulate riches. And it seemed that Filipinos were dissatisfied with what was necessary for the present. In a world plagued by natural disaster where food stores could easily be wiped out by the next typhoon or earthquake, living for the present might be a logical response, a form of living in tune with nature. And Legazpi and his European snobbery looked down on Filipinos. He perceived it as laziness. So that was supposed to be brief, but I just wanted to say that. But my one, I don't know, sis, you have thoughts?
I don't know. It's just like, yeah, capitalism and how we were looked on as lazy, and we're not. We just didn't feel the need to take more than we needed. Like, what were we going to use it for, you know? And just like we read in this previous chapters about gold and stuff, about how our ancestors saw that as a resource, and they didn't take any more than they needed. They just needed something for a bracelet. They just took that much for a bracelet, and they just left the rest because why? Right? So, yeah.
Well, because
Yeah.
there's a point. One of my favorite Rumi quotes is, I know enough to know I know nothing. Is it Rumi? No, it's Carl Jung, I think. But at some point, you just, whatever, I don't need to. So again, protect your energy and take deep breaths. So I just wanted to bring up the word encomendia. I can't say it. This is why I took sign language in high school, y'all.
Encomienda.
Encomienda.
Yes, encomienda.
Encomienda system made Native people, quote, wards of the colonists who were supposed to protect them and prepare them for baptism as Catholics. In return, these Native people paid tribute to the colonizers in the form of goods, or more often, labor. And what is labor? slavery. So I just want to bring up how Legazpi set up the encomienda system in Cebu, and he apportioned 1/3 of the population to be encomiendas to the crown. That is, their tribute was sent back to the King of Spain. The other 2/3 rewards of the colonists and were required to pay tributes to the settlers. So not only did they come in, take our land, and start making us in the system, and the fruits of our labor would go back to the Philippines, or you would stay there and you would work for the settlers. So that's how we became servers, probably, aka. Anyways, so Legazpi ran into some difficulty. However, since he could not get a clear headcount of Cebu's residents, Legazpi wrote that in some towns, not a sixth of the supposed population could be found. Because remember, they like pack up their shit. Yeah. This is kind of funny. This Filipinos like survival, man. Either the original figures have been exaggerated or the inhabitants had fled inland when it was time to be counted. That's so funny. Like, anyways, it elaborates a little more. It says it's worth noting that not everyone was subjected to this system. Only males aged 18 to 60 were required to pay tribute. Chieftains, meanwhile, were exempt, as well as their eldest sons. They had no motive to oppose the system, and in fact, many acted as tribute collectors. See how they corrupted us, y'all? Anyway, Philan said the alleged abuses of the early encomienda in the Philippines were the same catalog of complaints that had previously come out of Mexico. Some encomienderos overcharged their rewards, others failed to protect them, and because rosters were not kept up to date, sons often end up paying tribute on behalf of the fathers who had long since passed away. Nevertheless, the Spaniards adopted the system, effectively setting the Philippines on the same road.
So there we go.
This is how they started government.
Yeah. Yeah. And so funny because like the whole thing, this whole encomienda system is supposed to be it's government, right? And so they're trying to do a census, like what is the population? But we didn't really
they're like, what happened is we tried to count them, but they're not there. Where they go?
Yeah. We're like, no.
Filipinos are like popping in and out the island. It's funny. Where did they go? Where did they go? Like
they went inland. They went inland when it was time to be counted.
Yeah, but like, did they go underground? Did they go in a volcano? What did they do, sis?
Maybe they went
to Lemuria. Where did they?
They went to the mountains, probably. Maybe.
Yeah.
So, all right, Sissy. Thanks for bringing that word.
Double punch, y'all. Thanks for hanging in there. So.
Are you complete? All right, so we're going to go into quotes for chapter 14. And my quote is from 205. So in amongst the story in chapter 14, Portuguese Armada showed up to Cebu, and basically the commander was Gonzalo Pereira. And Pereira, long story short, was telling Legazpi to leave. And Legazpi was like, no. So what Pereira could not do by persuasion, he attempted to do by force. He blockaded the port to cut off native supply boats and then began to bombard the settlement. So the Portuguese bombarded the Spanish settlement. Not only did the wooden fort fall that they had built earlier, but all the native homes on the shore went up in flames. Portuguese landing parties burned nearby rice fields. Again, Cebu, right? Scorched earth, words or spells. Don't name your kids or the places in your life after things that might be negative. Okay, that's just a little side note. Anyway, so the Portuguese landing parties burned nearby rice fields. The siege continued for 3 long months, but the Spaniards did not give in. And then Ati Judy writes, I thought about the Filipinos of Cebu who were caught in the middle of all of this. Their point of view seemed to be missing, even though these events happened on their home, on their island. I assume that most of them were able to move inland, but the aftermath of this destruction would likely be felt for years and generations. So,
Yeah. Disrespect.
so yeah, I just like, so not only are the Spaniards are there, now the Portuguese are there, and now they're fighting each other. And now, the Spaniards had burned shit before, and now here are the Portuguese coming and landing, and to get back at the Spaniards, they're also burning shit.
Mhm. Mm-mm.
So, and then yeah, right
Mm.
before Ati Judy said she was wondering about the Filipinos there and how they were caught in the middle of all this. That was my thought too. Like, damn, like this is their land. And like, yeah, it's just devastating. It's just like their shit is
Yeah.
being burned, like they're being, even if they were safe and moved inland, like think about it, they had to abandon their homes and make new homes, and their original homes were burned, their ancestors were dug up, their sacred places were desecrated. Ah, it's just a lot, so everybody just breathe. I'm reminding myself, breathe.
Remember when we breathed in the beginning? Touch
Yeah,
your heart, come back in. This was in the past. You're safe now.
yeah.
And we got work to do.
And this is why we're remembering. This is why we're remembering. This is why we're learning the nuances of the stories so that we can move forward with healing. And so, yeah, anyway, that is my quote.
Thanks
And I
for
am complete.
thank you for sharing that, sis. That again, it's a lot of like skeletal narratives, but there's definitely this a lot. So
It's a lot.
yeah, if you want to like, especially for folks who listen and they're script writers, like this is like a ripe chapter for a lot of plot twists. If you think about it. Maybe I'm talking to myself. All right, so my quote is on page 199 to 200, and it's actually not even my quote. It's Nicholas Kushner's article that Ate Judy cites, and I thought it was just again a visual. We're just putting together, connecting all the dots, y'all. So the 6 years following Legazpi's initial landing in Cebu were the most critical in the early history of the colony. It was simply a fight for survival. The serious shortage of food drove the Spaniards to eat not only grass and palm leaves, but also mice and rats. They were harassed by the Portuguese from without and unfriendly tribes within. That the venture survived at all was due almost entirely to those rare qualities which were the hallmark of the 16th century Spanish conquistador: an utter disregard for danger and an amazing capacity to endure physical trials. So again, she cites it's from his article, Legazpi 1564 to 1572. She includes also Blair and Robertson's translating again Spanish documents around that time. And because, the Spaniards are writing all this stuff down in some ways, right? And burning ours for some reason. And then Legazpi conquered the island of Cebu in 1565, but it was plagued by malcontent and mutiny, like Sis had quoted earlier. And that's when he basically eventually moved to Panay. So,
Yeah. So again, it is like the nuance of everything, right? So even though the Spaniards were here, they weren't having a good time either, but they still didn't leave.
yeah, for God, glory, and riches. I don't know.
Oh, but yeah.
So, anyway, I'm complete. How are you,
Yeah.
sis?
I am complete as well. Um, I just hope all y'all out there are are okay. I don't know. Like maybe because we've just read this like thoroughly, like it's just maybe we need to
We're processing. Yeah, we're
yeah.
processing.
Yeah. But I just realized like, this I'm just now realizing like this book is probably not going to wrap up nicely. This is not going to be like a happy ending. And I knew that like in my mind, but now like going through it right now, it's like, oh shit, Like at first I was feeling a high off of they defeated Magellan and all that. And I was like, woohoo. But now we're just getting into like what happened afterwards. And that's not nearly as woohoo, you know, more sad. So,
Yeah, it doesn't stop there. And regardless of how this book ends, I think Ate Judy said when we interviewed her, spoiler alert, I think that's going to come out before this, that she's interested in how we, meaning I mean, and I, and whoever else reads this, how we interpret like the last few chapters. Cause I think she was like, yeah, like there's more drama. And I just brought it up to say that we can always rewrite narratives, y'all. Like,
you're right.
We're here, we're alive, we survived, we reincarnated, we're out here.
Let's
so
go. Yes.
We can also write a happier ending.
Thank you, sis. Thank you. Yes.
As we gratefully end this conversation, separate and cleanse our energies, close out this container, we must recognize and honor all our ancestors, guides, and forces that brought us here. We also recognize you, dear Kapwatid, for tuning into this conversation today. And as always, your Ates leave you with a blessing. As you continue this brave journey of remembrance, may you know that even if the decolonizing truth is rife with the sacred both and paradoxes, while it can be frustrating to realize how much we have forgotten, it can also be liberating to know how much we can remember. You are not alone. You have been called to this sacred work, Kapwatid. And while you may feel grief, may you know that you will also find joy. May the remembrance of Kapwa anchor you back into your heart. And until we see you again, may you know that all is well and will be well. And no matter what happens, you are loved.